The distress beacon had been screaming for 6 hours before anyone dared to answer it. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Meridian's Promise, watching 3 alien fleets burn in real time on the tactical display. Not human fleets. Not human wars. A civilization called the Thren was dying 200 light-years away, and every major power in the galaxy had already decided their fate wasn't worth the fuel. "They're not answering," said her tactical officer, a young man named Rashid Malik, sweat beading on his forehead. "Nobody's answering, Commander. The Coalition Senate voted against intervention 4 hours ago." "I know what the Senate voted," Elena said quietly. On the screen, a burning Thren colony ship spun through space, venting atmosphere in silver ribbons that caught the starlight like tears. 14,000 souls aboard. Children among them, if the sensor readings on lifeform density meant anything. "Then, why are we still on approach vector?" Rashid asked. Elena didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about a promise made 3 days earlier, in a very different room, to a very different audience. One that had laughed at her. 3 days earlier, the Coalition Senate chamber was a cathedral of glass and cold light, built to make every species feel small beneath its arches. Elena stood at the podium, alone, facing 11 delegates who represented races far older and far stronger than her own. "The Thren cluster will fall within the week," she said. "Their neighbors, the Kos Dominion, have committed to a war of extermination, not conquest. This isn't politics. This is annihilation." Ambassador Thalvarun of the Austria Compact leaned back in his seat, 4 eyes narrowing with something between amusement and disdain. "Commander Vasquez, humanity has held a seat at this table for 9 years. 9 years? And you propose we spend coalition resources on a species with no strategic value, no trade routes, no technological contribution?" "They have value because they're alive," Elena said. Soft laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel laughter, worse than that. Bored laughter. The laughter of people who had heard idealism before and grown tired of it. "Humanity's compassion is noted," said Virun, and dismissed. "The vote stands. No coalition ships will be dispatched to the Thren cluster." Elena had walked out of that chamber, with her jaw tight and her hands shaking, and by the time she reached the docking bay, she'd already made her decision. She didn't need the coalition's permission. She commanded a ship. Humanity had given her that ship, and humanity, whatever else it was, had never been very good at watching people die and calling it someone else's problem. But no one expected what happened next. Back in the present, Elena keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the commander. We are proceeding to the Thren cluster. This was not authorized by the Coalition Senate. I am not ordering anyone to stay who doesn't want to. If you disembark now, no one will think less of you." Silence answered her. Then, one by one, every station on the bridge lit green. Nobody left. The Meridian's Promise dropped out of transit space directly into the middle of a slaughter. Kos warships. Hulking vessels shaped like clenched fists, black hulls scarred with the marks of 100 conquests, surrounded the last Thren evacuation convoy. Elena had read the intelligence reports. The Kos didn't take prisoners. They didn't accept surrender. Their culture treated mercy as a structural weakness, something to be bred out over generations, and the Thren, smaller, gentler, a species of scholars and farmers who had never built a warship in their history, were about to be erased from existence. Enemy fleet designation, 12 capital ships, 41 escorts, Rashid reported, voice tight. "Commander, we are 1 light cruiser against an armada." "I'm aware," Elena said. The truth stunned the entire bridge crew. What Elena said next would be repeated in Coalition history archives for the next 200 years. Though no one on that bridge knew it yet. "Open a channel to the Thren convoy. Tell them to run for the following coordinates. We're going to buy them time. Commander, 1 ship against 53. "I didn't say we'd win," Elena said. "I said we'd buy time. Rashid, arm every missile tube. Helm, put us between the convoy and the Kos fleet now." The Meridian's Promise surged forward, a single silver blade against a wall of black iron. What the Kos commander, a war-scared officer named Drauz Colvin, saw on his own tactical display made him actually laugh. A short, ugly bark of contempt. 1 unregistered human vessel, flying no coalition banner, charging directly at his armada. He assumed it was a malfunction. No sane commander would do this. "Target the human ship first," Colvin ordered. "Let it serve as an example." Everything changed in the next 30 seconds. The Meridian's Promise didn't fire on the capital ships. It couldn't have hurt them if it tried. Instead, Elena's weapons officer targeted something the Kos had never bothered to shield properly. Their sensor drones. the eyes that let the massive fleet track the fleeing Thren convoy through the debris field. One by one, precision strikes turned the Cos fleet half-blind in the chaos of burning wreckage and ionized gas. "They can't see the convoy anymore," Rashid said, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Commander, it's working. It buys us minutes, not hours," Elena said. "Minutes are what we have. Use them." For 11 minutes, one human ship danced through 53 enemy vessels, never landing a killing blow, never trying to. It absorbed fire meant for civilians. It jammed targeting arrays. It became, quite deliberately, the most annoying and most necessary obstacle in the galaxy. Then a Cos capital ship's beam weapon found its mark, and the Meridian's promise shuddered as its shields collapsed to 11%. The Council back at Coalition Command had made a terrible mistake, and they were about to learn it. What none of the Cos commanders knew, what not even Elena had planned for, was that her distress signal, broadcast on an open frequency the moment she entered the system, had been picked up by every human vessel within 3 transit days. Merchant haulers, mining rigs, a single aging patrol frigate that hadn't seen real combat in a decade. None of them were warships built for this fight. All of them came anyway. "Commander," Rashid's voice cracked with something like joy. "We have inbound contacts. Human registry, 6 vessels entering the system." Colvin watched his sensors with the first flicker of uncertainty he'd felt in years. "Reinforcements? Send me their fleet classification." His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, they're not military vessels. 3 are cargo haulers. 1 is a mining platform tug. They're ramming formation, sir." Nobody knew what humanity was hiding, and they were about to find out. Unarmed ships, their hulls never designed for battle, threw themselves into the Cos formation not to destroy, but to disrupt, forcing enemy vessels to break attack runs or risk catastrophic collision. It wasn't strategy from any military academy. It was 6 captains who had heard a stranger's cry for help and decided that mattered more than their own safety. Colvin's fleet, built for annihilating the weak and the unprepared, had never fought an enemy that refused to calculate the odds before charging in. "This is insane," Colvin muttered, watching his formation fracture under the weight of ships that shouldn't have been a threat at all. "They have nothing to gain." "Sir, the Thren convoy has reached the transit boundary," his officer reported. "They're jumping to safety." And that was the moment everything the Cos believed about weakness fell apart. Colvin made his decision in the space of 2 seconds. The kind of decision that separates commanders who survive from commanders whose names become warnings. He ordered the withdrawal, not because his fleet was beaten, because the cost of finishing the fight had suddenly become incalculable. And calculable cost was the only language the Cos truly respected. The Armada retreated into transit space, leaving behind a battered human cruiser, 6 wrecked civilian vessels, and 1 convoy of 14,000 Thren survivors, who owed their lives to people who had never met them. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. When Elena limped the Meridian's promise back into Coalition space 3 days later, she expected a court-martial. She got one. Ambassador Varun himself presided over the inquiry, his 4 eyes cold with fury. "You violated a direct Senate order," he said. "You endangered a Coalition vessel and crew for a species with, as I said, no strategic value." Elena stood at attention, exhausted, bandaged, unbroken. "With respect, Ambassador, I didn't ask what they were worth. I asked what they needed." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the doors opened, and a Thren elder, small, silver-scaled, moving with the careful dignity of someone who had buried more of her people than she could count, walked to the center of the floor and knelt before the Senate. 14,000 of my people are alive, because a species we had never spoken to heard us crying in the dark and came running," she said. "You call this reckless. We call it the only mercy shown to us in this war. If humanity has no seat of honor at this table, then this table has no honor to offer." The Council had made a terrible mistake, and now the entire galaxy knew it. The inquiry into Elena Vasquez's conduct was quietly closed within the week. No formal record of punishment was ever filed. Instead, something unprecedented happened. 11 other species, watching the footage of 6 unarmed human vessels, standing between a fleeing convoy and an armada that outgunned them 50-1, began quietly reaching out to Coalition diplomats about a very different question. Not whether humanity deserved its seat, whether humanity would answer, if it were their turn to cry for help. Elena never gave speeches about that day. She didn't need to. Somewhere in the archives of a dozen worlds, the story kept spreading on its own. Of a fleet that shouldn't have won, a species that shouldn't have cared. and a commander who once said that value wasn't measured in strategic worth, but in whether or not someone was still alive to need saving. The galaxy had cried for help once, expecting silence. It got fire instead, and learned at last that fire could also mean warmth.